back and thanks so much for watching Morning Live. Now, as 7 people have now tested positive for a coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, the Department of Basic Education has warned against the shutting down of schools without following proper protocol. Now, during a media briefing yesterday, Minister Angie Motshekga said that the decision to suspend classes should be made by the Department of Health. And this after a school in Hilton in KwaZulu-Natal closed on Friday, and yesterday Grayston Preparatory School in Johannesburg also closed, the latter after discovering that a teacher had been in contact with one of the people who tested positive for COVID-19 following a trip to Italy last week. Now, to discuss this and other matters, I should say, regarding education, we have the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, with us. Thanks so much for coming through this morning, Minister.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
Now, Minister, firstly, when it comes to the coronavirus and, schools closing down, let's just start by speaking to the discussions that you've had with the Department of Health with regard to schools.
No, on the matter of coronavirus, as government, we work under the leadership of health. So if we have to take any decision or take any steps, it will be with consultation, not that they have to close schools for us or tell us not to close, but we'll only do it under their guidance and under their, in partnership with them. Because it could be quite dangerous to take decisions which are uninformed by what steps we have to follow. For instance, if you close a school because a teacher has been in contact with a person who's been confirmed with coronavirus, it might be that she's already infected learners. So you need Department of Health to come and manage the environment for you, whether perhaps you need to test other learners. But if you close this education without necessarily following the necessary steps, may not be useful. And that's why we're saying we have to be guided by health, because we are managing coronavirus led by the Department of Health.
Well, it would seem as though there is quite a bit of paranoia about the 2 schools that closed, the one in KZN and the one up here in Gauteng on Friday and yesterday. Did they follow proper protocol and procedure?
You see, the KZN one, I wouldn't blame them because it was the first time and we had not, I think, publicly established what steps should be followed. And that's why immediately the Minister of Health and all officials in the province, social development, the Premier and the Department of Health visited the area to then manage the situation with them. So, and that's what should happen. So then other schools that come into the prison, they need to report that there's a threat that they identify. Then the Department of Health and Education, in partnership with the school, will try and manage the environment. So you just don't do it on your own, because you might jump some steps which are necessary and not be able to contain it the way you're supposed to contain it.
So is there a prescribed protocol in place right now that has been circulated to schools? Yeah.
The first thing, to all public institutions, so not only schools, the first thing that you do if there's any suspicion, so doctors know exactly if a patient presents itself with symptoms, they know exactly, and that's how the Natal case was handled. In the case of Grayston, they were supposed to immediately say, we have a teacher who's declared that she was in contact, so what are the steps? So there is a call center that, and every province has an office. For instance, here, you contact the call center to say there's this threat, what do we do? And quickly then they dispatch a team which is going to listen properly to what has happened and then work out how to manage the situation. For instance, in Grayston, it was a teacher who's declared herself. So what we need to do is to say who was she in contact with and what would have happened. But if you close a school, which means you're going to jump some steps without necessarily putting in place the necessary precautionary measures.
So, and this has been circulated to all schools. Everybody is aware of what needs to be done.
No, we've not. As I say, it's public knowledge for everybody. Even in churches, I mean, in my church, we're told not to touch hands, but to wave. So it's information for everybody, including schools.
But don't you think it's important that you do send out a circular, Minister, because as happened at Grayston Prep yesterday, someone else at another school might disclose and there's another panic and the school shuts down.
That's what we did yesterday after the Grayston incident. We communicated with health that we really think we have to send to remind our schools about how to really manage the environment. Because what is true also about the Grayston paranoia is that we are a very vulnerable sector. We have 60 children in one room, so we really are a risk to the public, and we are also at risk. So perhaps, as I said to DG, perhaps the Grayston incident is a lesson that we shouldn't take ourselves as just the general public that's going to follow general protocols, because we are a very vulnerable sector and we have lots of people in one place at the same time, and we could be a huge risk to the public if we don't follow the protocols properly. So yesterday we took a decision to say we will develop, we will send the same circular to schools about how to manage any threat or any suspicion that they have.
And right now, what sort of steps have been taken by the department to ensure that there are safety precautions in schools? I think you've noticed coming into the SABC, there are hand sanitizers, there's dispensers, strategically placed. What has been done in schools, if anything at all, at this stage?
No, it's just follow the protocols that were established by health to say if a child presents themselves as coughing, they should treat it as a matter of urgency. So we've not put anything extra as schools except for insisting that schools have to follow the national protocols that have been established by health of washing hands. So we didn't send sanitizers in schools. The children have to wash hands. There should be enough ventilation. They should encourage children not to really touch each other, hold hands, touch objects. But we didn't do anything special like bring sanitizers. We don't have biometrics, so we can say remove that. So it's to really manage the environment within our own limitations, but also around our own needs as a sector. So we've not put anything special except for the protocols which have been established by health.
But do you think you should, Minister, and as you say, understanding the limitations, the constraints within which you operate financially and otherwise, but something like soap, hand soap, for example, when children wash their hands, is this something that you will be stepping up in schools?
No, we've already sent, we had a meeting with MECs last week, Thursday, to say, for instance, normally in our schools to save on water, when kids wash hands for school nutrition, they use a common bucket. Said, no, they shouldn't. They should use running water. So within the risk, managing within the risk within our sector, that should have been communicated by MECs, because we discussed it last Thursday to say, we have to send communiques to different provinces, because different schools also have got different threats. Some schools, as I said, there's overcrowding. Some schools are comfortably not overcrowded. Some schools come, So we're just set within the realities of different schools and provinces. Schools should take precautionary measures to make sure that children are protected, or the school committee is protected.
So yesterday's conference was not just about the coronavirus. There were other issues to discuss as well, curriculum related, the general education certificate, and of course that trial. Please talk to us about, firstly, clarifying what this is, because there was an assumption that this was a school leaving certificate, which, your department came to explain that was not necessarily what it meant. So let's start at that point and then explain this trial that you had embarked upon. Where is it at and how is it going?
No, thank you very much, Sakina. This general education certificate, it's an old decision that government has. It's in our 1995 white paper in education. It has always been in the framework of our schooling, of our assessment systems, that we will have, at the end of basic education, we'll have a general education certificate. It's an old decision of 1995. By 2009, because we can't certificate ourselves, we registered the certificate with SAQA in 2009. But because we didn't implement it in 2009, by 2012, after 5 years, it got deregistered. So the process that we're in is to apply again with SAQA for the registration of the General Education Certificate. And the purpose of the General Certificate, even from the 1995 white paper, was to say at the end of your basic education, which is grade 9, you should certify give a standardized certification for learners so that they can go into different careers, so that they can go to the further education and training, which is your matric. They can go to your technical and vocational streams. But for the past 25 years, we've not ramped up adequately your vocational and your technical. Therefore, there was no need, I think, an urgency to have the certificate because kids were going through one stream. But now that we have adopted a 3-stream curriculum, we just felt that it was important for us to go back to that decision and begin to issue the general education certificate. And that's what the issue was. So that at every exit point, at grade 3, we want to assess our children with a common standard. At grade 6, there must be a common standard. At grade 9, there must be a common standard so that a child coming from, like you have your matric certificate, that a child passing matric in Zululand, the same quality assured certificate as a child who comes here from Gauteng. And that's what we wanted to do, that we were intending to do with the general education certificate. So it's a standardized assessment at grade 9. But at grade 9, because it's at the end of your basic education, then we certify that you have finished your basic education. It's either you're going to your FET, which is your usual matric academic stream, or you're going to your further education and training in terms of your vocational or technical. So it's really implementing an old decision that for different reasons we're not able to implement in the past 25 years.
So are you able to give us a progress report on the field trial thus far?
Yeah, so we've applied, because we have to apply for SAQA. They will tell us what they want. So as I said, it has expired in 2012, so we have to reapply afresh. But in the meantime, we have to prepare the system in terms of whether the indicates that we're not going to assess all subjects. We're going to assess 4 key subjects which determine whether you go to FET, whether you go to, but we will certify it. So we also have to apply with Umalusi. So the administrative process has started with SAQA, with Umalusi, to say this is what we want to produce. So Umalusi will have to say your standards are low or high or add more. That process is taking place. In the meantime, we're preparing the system itself to say these are the subjects which are going to be assessed at the GEC certificate, and this is the currency. So at the stage where we are, it's really the administrative and the advocacy to make people aware that in 2 years' time we will be offering this certificate, and these are the standards. So we have to field test also the exams to say, are they indeed the right test? Because, so you have to prove to Umalusi that it's field tested and indeed it's the right standard, it has been pitched properly.
So these technical occupational subjects that have been submitted to Umalusi, what are they exactly?
There are quite many. So we have your technical subject, we have a vocational subject. The technical vocational, it will be your usual bricklaying, electricity, that's your vocational ones. Your technical ones will be your technical maths, your technical science, your engineering. So there are different streams. The other one, for instance, your vocational will take you straight to work. Your vocational technical can take you either to work or will take you to university. For instance, we have at university, they have a school of aviation. It's a technical stream. They've started already. In your coastal provinces, they have maritime studies. They've started already. In some schools, for instance, in the Free State, they're working with your motor industries. They've started already. So we're ramping up that side. And that's why we really felt that we have to begin then to implement the entire framework that we had agreed on since 1995.
And for those who are skeptical about this avenue, how would you explain to them why is this necessary?
Yeah, I think maybe the weakness which we identify that we didn't, because it's an old decision of 1995, and people, I mean, some of them, I'm sure they were in yourself in the ECD center, so you just don't know where this thing come from. So we think we didn't communicate adequately to remind people that there is this decision about the framework, and also to encourage people to read what is the almost every other country I can think of, except for America and a few countries, don't issue a certificate at grade 9. You go to Botswana, it's a standard thing in education. It's not anything new that we are doing as a country. Actually, we're an exception that we're not doing it. America is not doing it because the system is completely federal, so they don't have your national standard. But in Botswana, Kenya, anywhere else, Cuba, they offer a certificate at the end of your basic education. So we're just aligning ourselves with what is a standard practice in education.
Many more questions where that's going, but we're running out of time. So I want to ask you about a situation in Tlagameng village in the Northwest Province, where there hasn't been a single day of schooling since the academic year started. Are you aware of that situation, Minister, and what is being done about it?
No, we have 3 such areas in different parts of the country. We have an area like that in Limpopo. It's the Northwest. I think also KZN. So MECs are trying to work with communities to resolve the impasse that communities have with government in those provinces. All of them, it's complaints and difficulties which have nothing to do with us. So what we have to do really is to find that the 2 parties find themselves so that kids are released to schools. But what you can't do also is to force kids to go to school if the environment is not safe. So we are dealing with 3 communities where the whole term kids have not been able to go to school.
It's an interesting conundrum because children have an inalienable right to education, and here they are being denied that right by their own parents. Is there anything more that the department can do? Have you been in consultation with the Human Rights Commission about this?
Yeah, you remember the Kuruman thing. So it's actually a very unfortunate situation where communities use their children as shields when they have to fight with government. So if you can bring the human rights or anybody, even ourselves, the key thing, or even police, the key thing is to have a safe passage for kids to go to schools. And that's why along the Kuruman area we had to engage both government and all contending parties to say, please release the children to us. And that's what the MEC is doing, Northwest, Limpopo, and also in some areas in KZN. So it has become a common feature. In Mpumalanga, at some stage, we had kids not going to school for 4 months. And it was during the time of Premier Mabuza, they had to go there as the province, camp there, try to work out what the difficulties are, and finally get the police to step in because, as you correctly say, it's a criminal act to stop kids from schools.
So will you be advocating for more punitive measures when such instances come to pass?
That's what we do finally as our last resort, because at the end of the day, we have a responsibility to protect children's education. So up to now, we're still engaging, still working with different parties to really, because actually it's not even our matter, to say people who are contending government or local government must find each other, because we are the ones, must find each other and solve the problems, because we're the most affected when there are these warring sides. So we're dealing with that situation.
Should this action be criminalized, as it has been in some countries where it is a crime when children actually do not attend school?
No, that's why in Mpumalanga, when you had the same thing, the deputy president finally got police to come in and people were arrested, and that's what helped. In Kuruman, at some stage, we really did indicate that we were going to have to get police to intervene. If you remember, we had almost 3 months non-schools. We kept and what is said, Sakin, it's not the parents. You'll find that it's a group of bandits which are really making the environment difficult for learners and parents. In Kuruman, parents used to cry. At one meeting when I left, they asked me to say, are you leaving our children in the lurch? Are you leaving us with these criminals? And I said, I'm on your side. So these criminals are interfering with my work and with your children. So we have to hold hands to solve the problems. We finally managed to solve the problems when the province came in and began to address the concerns of that community. Otherwise, we're not winning. These kids were staying in the bushes, and it was just a big runaround. So even in Northwest, it's a big runaround. The MEC is seized with the matter, and we're doing whatever we can to make sure that we can really protect the rights of children, because you're quite correct. They have the right to education. And as education department, we have the responsibility to make education accessible. So which means we have to do whatever it takes within our powers to make sure that education is accessible. And we're doing that.
We have to leave it there.
Okay,
we're hopelessly
thanks.
out of time. Thank you so much to Angie Motshekga, Minister of Basic Education, talking about the shutting down of schools due to suspected cases of coronavirus, and also other changes in the curriculum and challenges that the department is currently facing. It's time for news with Leanne.